It's a crazy world, crazy world. Somebody's gotta have to save you. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. Somebody's gotta have to save you.
All right, it's Friday, which means it's time for another roundtable extravaganza. I'm Dave Rubin. This is the Rubin Report, and joining me on the panel today is the once canceled, now back in business, Winston Marshall of The Winston Marshall Show. And also joining me is co-Miamian, New York Times bestselling author and host of the Isabel Brown Show, Isabel Brown. Lady, gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
Great to be here.
Isabel, before I do anything else, I think that's going to officially be the last time I ever say someone's a New York Times best-selling author because it's all fraudulent and nonsensical. I'm happy for you and your editor, but that's it. I'm just not saying it anymore. Are you okay with that?
Well, just let it go. It's okay. There are much more important metrics in the future America we are building, and I'm okay with that.
And Winston,
great. I think congratulations. That's awesome.
It's awesome, but we all know it's fraudulent and made up. And yes, it was legit that she got on there, but that they screw with the numbers and blah, 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 blah. All right, it's Friday. We're going to catch up on a whole bunch of stuff. Obviously, the big news that broke yesterday was that Matt Gaetz will not be part of the incoming Trump administration, which happened just as I was getting off air yesterday. So we'll catch up on that. Some stuff from over the pond, because that's where Winston resides, and free speech, and World War III might be coming, and a bunch more. But let's jump in first with some of the madness that is happening with the left and the media more broadly. George Washington University professor Allan Lichtman, who had predicted 9 presidential elections in a row, he got this one wrong big time. He said Harris was going to win it. And he went on Piers Morgan's panel show. I'm pretty sure all three of us have done those panels before. And they often break down into like a general psychotic mental institution on television. And he was on with Cenk Uygur over at the Young Turks. And so you're going to watch a far lefty and a discredited pollster get into it. Enjoy, I guess.
Don't blame the voters. I think, look, we could get into this discussion, but one, I think you're blaming the voters. I think that's a terrible idea. And look, I debated Professor Lichtman before. I told him his theories about the keys were absurd. I was right. He was wrong. I said he'd lose his keys.
No, you were
Couldn't
not
find
right,
them
and
before
I
the
was
election.
not wrong. And that's a cheap shot, and I won't stand for it.
Well, who won, brother?
You should not be taking cheap shots at me.
Who won?
You want to make your point,
live
make your
in
point.
a total
Don't make it
world
personal.
of denial.
I read your own followers' comments, and they all trashed you, every one of them, and supported me.
Yeah,
so quiet with your personal attacks.
Yeah, come find out again.
Make whatever point you want. Don't
Look,
make it personal.
You don't know anything. You don't know anything.
You attacked me personally.
You're so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only been a professor for 51 years.
On this program, I've never been able to finish a thought.
How many books have you published? No, because you're personally attacking me again. Say whatever you want, but I'm not going to stand for personal
brother, you got it wrong.
Say
whatever
you want.
Preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just finish a goddamn thought ever on this show?
No, not if you're personally attacking. I admitted I was wrong. I don't need you to call me stupid.
Okay.
Can I just say, it's great to see you Democrats all getting along so well.
Who taught you manners?
It's lovely to see a post-election harmony as you all come together again.
Hey, Alan, Hey, Alan, you deserve a tall glass of shut-up juice, so can you just shut up for a second? And let someone who knows what they're doing.
You're so right, Piers. You're so right. We're so unified right now.
You want, I will not sit here and stand for personal attacks, for blasphemy against me. You don't need to do that. You don't boost your own ego
against you? What the hell are you? Are you
like
Jesus Christ, you loser? Okay, can I just give the correct answer for once?
That's some quality television right there. First off, I'd like to apologize to the audience for playing that. I'd like to apologize to Winston Marshall and Isabel Brown. But there is a reason that I played that, because the collapse of the left, Cenk and these lefties online, they were all predicting the same thing, that Harris was going to win and that Trump is evil and everything else. And then the pollsters that got it wrong, and then the fact that these people are now screaming at each other on media. There's some reason, I think, to show some of this. Am I right, Isabel? Is there some kernel of something in here, or is this perfectly gratuitous and wrong?
Well, it's fun to watch more than anything, but I do think there is a lesson we can take away from it. I just have to say my personal favorite moment of that clip is Harry Sisson unable to contain his giggles. He just can't let it out anymore. Oh, what a time to be alive. But it's been interesting in the wake of the last 2 weeks with the presidential election, watching the left try to feel their way through the darkness of what the heck possibly happened, with every single one of the so-called experts, be it pollsters or media talking heads or political analysts, claiming they knew exactly what was going to happen. It was going to be a very, very close election, but Kamala was going to run away with it. And it felt oddly reminiscent to the 2016 election, when every expert was telling you that there was a 99% guarantee Hillary Clinton would become the next president of the United States. But ultimately, all of this is mere projection. And I think what the left, in particular, left media, is failing to understand about the American people today is that they are living in a completely different reality than ordinary people. If you had been listening to podcasters or independent media or a TikTok account for the last 6 months, every one of them could have told you that Donald Trump was going to walk away with this election in a complete landslide, because that's where real people are having real conversations. I don't know what that means for the future of The View or MSNBC or Piers Morgan or the Young Turks, but I do think it's an opportunity that even some of the most far left individuals in the space, like Cenk, for example, are waking up to realize we got it wrong. Why did we get it wrong? Maybe we are really out of touch, and this is a reckoning moment for us.
Right. For someone like Cenk, I think it will just be an opportunity to kind of rebrand himself as if he had nothing to do with any of this. But that aside, Isabel, I owe you dinner next time it's on me, because you just explained the clip and why I should have played it better than I possibly could have. Winston, is this an American? Well, Piers is your guy. He's from the UK. But this sort of destroying each other and shut up juice and all of this, should we be angry at you people for bringing this across the pond to us?
Well, I kind of have some schadenfreude with this. There is some pleasure. Maybe it's wrong of me, but I do take I'm enjoying seeing this implosion, probably because those of us, like I think you guys, will have suffered for having our opinions, and now we've sort of been proved right. My experience being in America is that the zeitgeist has been comfortably yanked to the right. And so, having been ostracized for my opinions, and I think many people have, now to be like, oh, actually, it's completely normal to think this way. It's enjoyable to see those people who were the ostracizers, some of them crying on the television, like we saw last, was it Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel it was. I would say this, though. There's a question about, I think the American voter, and this applies to the British voter, is capricious in the sense that it could quite easily move away. And I do hope, my observation from outside America is that this opportunity that the MAGA movement has isn't squandered. And it was squandered in Britain under Boris Johnson in 2019. He had a stonking majority and he threw it away almost immediately. And he paid the price 5 years later, now that we have a literal socialist as a prime minister. So I do hope that this team is successful in delivering for the people who have put them there. As for the Democrat Party, well, this is the conversation I'm having every night, is which way Democrat, man? And it'd be very interesting to see whether they try to pursue the establishment, which I think were completely rebuked, or perhaps go towards a more populist direction. Bernie Sanders, of course, although I think he's a complete establishment shill, he was a populist legend in 2016 and 2015, and then immediately threw it away at the snap of a finger, got in line with the establishment. Now he's thrown them back under the bus and trying to reclaim populism. Now, Cenk Uygur, to be fair to him, I know you're a big fan, Dave, but to be fair to the bloke, he's actually been criticizing the left in a way that we've been criticizing the left for a long time. You showed one of his tweets earlier, but he was saying unlike Elon Musk and the MAGA right, if you criticize orthodoxy on the left, you are punished. It doesn't seem to be that way on the right. So
sure, but I mean, I can't give these people credit for that because that's exactly what they've done to us for years. But I get your, well, that actually brings me to the other thing that I wanted to discuss before we move on, which is, Isabel, should we care that much whether the left reforms itself now or whether the few sane liberals can reconstitute a party or anything like that? Or should it be like, oh, you're a sane liberal? Congratulations, you're part of MAGA. I mean, I think that's the evidence with RFK. It's the evidence with me. It's the evidence with Tulsi. And the list goes on and on and on. So frankly, I actually don't care whether they want to be complete socialist, Hamas-supporting lunatics or a slightly less crazy version of that. It's like all of the good America-loving people are completely welcome on the right now.
You know, I think there's a huge temptation, Dave, to turn the cold shoulder a bit or stick the middle finger in somebody's face and say, okay, well, you canceled me, so we're just moving on and that's that. And I think that's what we've seen with the deepening division in the American cultural zeitgeist, but also just across the West. Obviously, we've seen this in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, and New Zealand. The deep cultural and political divide seems to only continue to grow. But if anything, this last election taught us that nobody is too far gone. And I think there's a beautiful redemption story happening in America today. There was a picture from UFC last weekend, for example, with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, RFK, and Tulsi Gabbard that went incredibly viral on Twitter. I'm sorry, X. I'll get used to it eventually. I'm
Whatever
such a dead namer. I need to get better about this. Yeah. But the caption that was going viral was, every single person in this photo used to be a Democrat. And doesn't that speak volumes about how far the left has lost the average person up to the most powerful people in this country because they don't actually represent liberal values anymore that the West was built upon in the true lowercase l liberal sense. So when we see these issues like free speech, which Cenk has been tweeting regularly about this week, saying it's an absolute shame that Jen Psaki and all of these media talking heads are saying we need to censor social media and regulate misinformation. When you see the Make America Healthy Again movement with RFK, which impacts every single one of us, when you're talking about illegal immigration and why it's such an important reality that we need to be curbing the violent crime taking lives of every American from every walk of life across the political spectrum. It doesn't discriminate based on your political identity. I think this new MAGA movement that we've seen in 2024 is so much bigger than the right. These are issues that are impacting every single person, and it's an opportunity, even for many left-wing individuals, to have a reckoning within themselves and say, wow, the people I've been doing everything I can to support, they really don't represent America, let alone my personal values.
For the record, there's just going to be some of them that I personally am not going to be welcoming, but it's not a party at my house. Winston, I'll give you a final word on this and then we'll move on.
The question I want to ask you guys is, which philosophy, forget about which leader of the Democrats might, or which talent there is, because it doesn't seem like there's much, but which philosophy? There's the neocon left, i.e. the establishment left, there's the woke left, and there's the populist socialist left. And for me, I mean, perhaps there's others, but it seems to me those are the three sort of big movements underneath the Democrats. And I suspect the populist left is the only one that could actually have victory in the future.
I don't know that it can have victory in the future, but I think it's the only one that would have any momentum after all of this, right? Like a sane left would be old school classical liberal Democrats that just believe maybe in a little bit more big government, let's say, than maybe the three of us or people watching this. I just think that none of them are left. They're now all part of, as Isabel just pointed out, they're all part of MAGA now, and they should be. And they're suddenly going to find that, by the way, these guys do government in a way more efficient way, which actually strengthens the ideas of classical liberalism. Should we move on?
I think they made an interesting statement also with the trend that the Kamala Harris campaign took this election. They went full-blown authoritarian socialism in the pick for VP and every single one of their policy initiatives. And that massively backfired, despite the left thinking that was going to be the best idea possible, especially to attract young voters. They seem to only be digging their heels in about that on the other side. And that's what you're seeing all these meltdowns on TV about. I don't know that they've learned their lesson from that. And frankly, I kind of hope that they haven't, because the newest poll dropping for the most likely candidate for the next round of presidential elections is Kamala Harris leading by a mile. So I say bring it on, to be honest.
Oh, shoot me. All right, let me talk to you guys about quality of life, and then we'll talk about Matt Gaetz in just a moment. Have you heard of senolytics? These science-backed ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago are revolutionizing healthy aging by promoting cellular rejuvenation. Aging can drain your energy and productivity, but that's where Qualia Senolytic comes in. If you told me I could feel 15 years younger in just a few months, I wouldn't have believed you until I tried it. As we age, our bodies build up zombie cells, worn-out cells that no longer help us but drain resources from healthy ones. Qualia Senolytic targets and removes these cells, letting your body thrive again. Think of it like trimming dead leaves off a plant. The best part? You only take it 2 days a month. Plus, it's non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and backed by research. Since starting with Qualia Senolytic, I felt more energized, productive, and youthful. Fewer aches and faster recoveries, more enthusiasm for life. It's been a game changer. Try Qualia Senolytic today. Go to qualialife.com/Rubin for up to 50% off. Plus, use code Rubin for an extra 15% off. That's QUALIA life.com/Rubin. Don't wait. Your future self will thank you. All right, so this broke just yesterday. Matt Gaetz will not be part of the administration. Here is his tweet. I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it was clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I remain fully committed to see that Donald J. Trump is the most successful president in history. I will forever be honored that President Trump nominated me to lead the Department of Justice, and I'm certain he will save America. So I just want to float out an idea that I put up on Twitter immediately after this and get your take on this. Maybe you guys agree, maybe not. But I think this is kind of ballpark right about this thing. This is what I wrote. Maybe I'm off on this, but the Gaetz thing seems like this. Gaetz was being investigated, which by stepping down from Congress closes the investigation. Now he steps down before the Department of Justice confirmation hearing, which doesn't dredge up all that stuff. He isn't in Congress anymore, but investigation is now closed and he moves to the private sector. Trump did a solid for someone who has always fought for him, and now the media has to move on to freaking out about someone else, probably Pete Hegseth, since they can't go for Gaetz anymore, but they look more ridiculous going after Hegseth than Gaetz. So win for everyone on Trump's side. What do you think? Isabel, I know it's like a little insider baseball stuff, but that roughly feels right. By stepping down from Congress, the investigation about whatever Gaetz did or didn't do disappears. It doesn't get dredged up again in the Senate hearing. He now is sort of a free man who can go do whatever he wants. Some people say maybe DeSantis will choose him to be replace Rubio in the Senate. But the point is, Trump is doing a favor for him in a way. And they all knew this was going to happen, right? Didn't they know that there was going to be like a crazy firestorm around him?
Well, one would imagine. I think insider baseball is a perfect analogy to what happens in Washington, but particularly on the Hill. If you've ever spent time working in Congress or being adjacent to the United States Congress at all, it's a whole lot of insider conversations that determine seniority, who gets picked for what legislation gets passed. And so I'm sure there's a whole lot more under the surface that the average American, and frankly, even the media, just has no idea about when it comes to this particular conversation. I won't pretend to know literally much about the behind the scenes details of this investigation. We know very little from what the media has told us, and now it's been closed. So I think it would be prudent for us not to guess what's really happening behind the scenes. But if I know anything about Donald Trump, the man is the master of the art of the deal. So clearly there was something behind the reasoning to nominate Matt Gaetz in the first place, for him no longer to seek that position. Now, a lot of people are theorizing that maybe it's just an opportunity for Trump to see who his friends are in Congress going into the approval process of all of these nominees and who's willing to immediately stab him in the back. Interesting thought, especially as we think ahead to the next primary election for members of the U.S. Senate and Congress. But there's definitely more to the story here we're not getting.
Yeah. Winston, what do you make of this? Because to me, it seems like a win for everybody other than Gaetz not getting a job that I do think he wanted, but he will no longer be investigated, maybe gets some other gig or goes private, but he's clear of the investigation. And it probably does help Trump's other nominations because there will be less craziness around the whole thing.
Yeah, I would like to just question you on this, and perhaps you have intel that I don't have, but at first glance, his resignation looks like an honorable thing, like, oh, I'm stepping away. I don't want to ruin the MAGA moment and the bad press and whatever. But in doing so, even though the charges were dropped, the charges of sex trafficking and other charges were dropped against him, so he can't actually defend himself. There was no evidence brought against him that, as far as I found, I couldn't find anything. So
it's not public.
It's not public, but but there's no, but it definitely exists.
Well, there were allegations and an investigation. Yeah.
There's allegations, but so he can't. It's kind of a trap because he can't. If it's complete nonsense and not true, he can't defend himself and be cleared. So in resigning for this reason, because of what someone else, presumably a political attacker, has said to him, he's kind of letting them win a little bit. Which, if it's true that he didn't do anything, then why would they let him do that? And so I'm not totally fully buying your it's unbelievably honorable for him, but he must feel really quite resentful, like, oh, I had to resign because of the thing that is not true. And
unless and again, I'm not accusing him of anything, unless he actually thought there was something sticky there, in which case it's like, oh, now it's completely gone and he just doesn't get to be in charge of the DOJ. But Trump did him a favor. Trump did a favor to a guy that's defended him, right? I get it. If he's completely innocent, you'd be annoyed. Right.
This makes him look guiltier, which, I mean, even at the first glance, it makes him look honorable. Dig a little deeper. It's like, oh, this doesn't look great. And there's no way he can go back to Congress. Is that correct?
Well, Isabel, do you know? I don't think so. I was trying to do a little research on it. He was just reelected. So if he went back in, do they open the? I don't think
because no one's replaced him, right? So
to my understanding, he resigned not his current seat in Congress, but the seat that he just won, which would cause a special election to happen here in Florida. And I think there's a special Florida law that has to happen within 60 days of a resignation. I still have to do a bit more digging on that, but the general rule of thumb was he was resigning from that position with the understanding they could run a special election and have someone in the new seat by January 3rd when the new Congress took office.
So feasibly, he could end up back keeping his congressional seat.
I suppose, if he wanted to rerun for his same seat. That's an interesting thought I hadn't given a lot of attention to.
Well, in some sense, this is why I wanted to do this segment on the back of the other segment, because it's like there's all this craziness, obviously, in the media on the left right now, but even the right, as things are kind of ordering themselves and looking pretty good, are still a little wacky.
Yeah, Dave, I also think you hit the nail on the head with your tweet yesterday that they will move on to something else. And so I think at first glance, this is an easy thing to say, oh, we're going to take the heat off of all of the investigation and all the allegations into any potential misconduct with these Trump nominees. But they're going to move on to a Pete Hegseth, to an Elon Musk, to a Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, this is not going to go anywhere. And if we've learned anything from the last several years, particularly thinking back to the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, anything will be said to try to prevent Trump nominees from being confirmed into these positions. So it's a long marathon. It's not a short sprint. And I think these individuals need to be ready to put up a fight.
I forget, did Brett Kavanaugh turn out to be the biggest serial rapist of all time, or did that not work out?
I guess the world may never know. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about TWC Maha and then more on the other side. The deep state strikes back with a clear message to create nuclear war as Trump transitions into office. It's confirmed NATO fires missiles into Russian territory, forcing Putin to the brink of nuclear war. We haven't been this close to World War III since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and folks, Putin does not mess around. If global disaster strikes, are you prepared? 90% of medications come from overseas. You need to cover the bases for your family's medical needs and prepare for any type of medical catastrophe. And the wellness company's emergency kits are your best defense against the unexpected. Packed with life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, amoxicillin, and more, these kits combat bacterial infections, staph, bite wounds, UTIs, strep throat, and respiratory illnesses. Each kit includes their medical board-approved guidebook that walks you through how to treat different emergency scenarios. Ordering your prescription emergency kit is easy and fully digital. Answer a couple questions after checkout, and your kit is delivered to your front door. Don't wait until a disaster strikes. Act now by heading over to twc.health/Rubin and use code Rubin to save up to $60 off plus free shipping. Again, that's twc.health/Rubin and use code Rubin to save up to $60 off plus free shipping. Kits available only in the US of A. All right, let's jump across the pond and talk about farming in the UK, which you might think is a niche topic, but actually it's deeply connected to everything happening across the world right now. This is from the BBC. The government is preparing to face the biggest protest yet over its domestic policy agenda since Labour won the general election. It is the week where farmers are heading for Westminster and bringing some noisy and influential friends with them. Guesswork about how many people will turn up at a protest before it has happened is exactly that, guesswork, but some reckon it could be between 10,000 and 40,000 people. Nearly 3 weeks on from the budget, when the plan to charge some farms inheritance tax was first announced, the anger seems to be growing rather than easing. There is a huge row about precisely how many people might be affected. Indeed, speaking on the Westminster Hour on BBC Radio 4, Baroness Malyoux, a Labour peer and the president of the Countryside Alliance, said the government's changes to inheritance tax relief smell of incompetence and that a large part of our party has become urban, divorced from a big section of the community. So, Winston, maybe you can clean up a little of this for our American audience that doesn't pay too much attention to all of this. But I think most people just from that can understand why this is connected to everything going on in the United States. I mean, inheritance taxes, punishing people that actually produce. I mean, the idea that you're going after farmers more and more, and it's not just happening in the UK. So I hand it to you.
Yeah, Americans should care about this. I was actually at the protest. I spent the day there. There were between 10 and 20,000 farmers. Well, I'd say protesters, most of whom were farmers. Probably there would be more, but as you know, farmers have unbelievably grueling work schedules. Most of them work 7 days a week. It's one of the most precarious businesses in the world. We've seen an uprising of farmers all across the world, from India to Sri Lanka, Germany. In the Netherlands, a new farmers' party even won provincial elections, a popular vote of provincial elections, only last year. But in Britain, what happened was our new Labour government, who were elected in July this year, announced their new budget, i.e. their new tax scheme and how they were going to raise money. Keep in mind, these are openly socialist. There's an openly socialist government. So Keir Starmer, only 2 weeks before the election, proudly said he was a socialist. And in this budget, they announced that they were going to raise £520 million from farmers by introducing a new inheritance tax. So at the moment, farmers are exempt from inheritance tax. The reason being that usually these farms, of which there are about 200,000 in Britain, stay in the family for generations. Mm-hmm. And if you have an inheritance tax, as is now being argued, you have to cut up the land and then sell off the land. And I mean, that's a whole other story about where the land goes to, but it basically completely destroys the business. Most farmers are asset rich, as in they have some or a lot of land, but cash poor. Mm-hmm. And so the protest is against this terrible tax. I met one man who's the head of the British Farmers Union who told me that his 82-year-old father is now thinking, well, if I die in 2 years or in a year and a half after this has come in, my kids won't have to they won't have to pay £500,000 tax. Mm-hmm. So if I die after, they will. So maybe they're literally people having conversations like that in people's families. There's reports of 4 farmers who have committed suicide already because of this. It's an idea it's just extraordinary, because the idea, we always go after the creators, unfortunately, in the West, but going after literally the people who are producing your food. I mean, the whole story sounds like an episode of Downton Abbey, that this would have happened. A farmer would have been confronted with a new tax and then thought, okay, it would be better if I died than handed this to my children who will suffer before it. Let me show you this video of a UK farmer talking about the leverage that they have, because they do have leverage, because we all eat food.
We are here at the farmers' protest in London. Why are you supporting the farmers?
I'm an agricultural contractor and farmer from Derbyshire in the East Midlands in the United Kingdom, and we're here to support British farmers to hopefully axe the farming tax and bring back subsidies and bring a general realisation to the public that they need British food and they need to know where the food comes from and how they can support British farmers.
So what do you want to achieve with this protest? Do you think there will be a positive outcome, or do you think the Labour Party will just ignore it?
Well, at the end of the day, as harsh as it sounds, if there isn't a positive outcome, then we can start shortening food supplies, which will have a knock-on effect on consumers all over the country. You'll see, remember the toilet roll scenario in lockdown where the toilet roll wasn't on the shelves? Well, you'll end up seeing that with food. At the end of the day, I'm sure people will miss food more than toilet roll. There'll be stuff that happens like more protests, and there'll be farmers going bankrupt. And the problem is, farmers go bust, they have to sell the land, big businesses buy it, big airlines to offset carbon. And then we import all the food in from Europe, and then they realise, right, well, the UK aren't self-sufficient, so we'll put the prices up. But on the other hand, what might happen is if you look now, they're having floods, but in the summer, if they have droughts and big floods in the summer, and it ruins all the crops, and that we can't buy the food for them because they simply haven't got it, and we're not self-sufficient, then where do we get our food from? That's my argument.
Guys, I have to mention, I get to see you two while the clip is playing, and you both were nodding along exactly the way everyone in my studio was nodding along the entire time. And it's interesting because the first two stories we talked about, it's a lot of like insider stuff. Okay, maybe this person said this or did this. How does politics work? But something about that the farmers are under attack, it is pretty damn clear, it seems to me, Isabel, who the good guys and bad guys are. And also Winston noted that Starmer basically said he's a socialist. I mean, in a sense, his whole political ethos is let's take control of everything.
Well, it's incredibly transparent. This entire process has been across the world. Winston mentioned several other countries that are dealing with these types of protests and government seizing of land and assets from farmers. And ultimately, it boils down to this idea that you will own nothing and you will be happy, down to the food supply. You'll eat what we tell you. And if it's poisonous for you, you'll never know because we'll never be able to tell you that. And you'll trust what you get on the shelf. And sadly, I think there's a huge education gap across the West right now on even the basics of where food comes from. I saw a video go insanely viral on TikTok a few days ago here in the US that a grown woman was talking to her husband saying, isn't it nice to think that we don't live in the age of farming anymore, that the age of farming and hunting is a thing of the past because we can just go to the grocery store. And her husband said, well, where do you think the food at the grocery store comes from? And she was so confused. What do you mean? They just have an unlimited supply. And sadly, I think the more urban our society has become and the more out of touch we are with the very basics of where does our food come from, the easier it is for these ideas to get traction, like land seizures and these inheritance taxes and over-regulating and completely overhauling the agriculture sector all across the world, because people don't know the very basics on why supporting agriculture is in the best interests of people.
Winston, just to try to give the devil his due here, what would be the most steel man argument you could give for what the government is trying to do right now?
The best steel man argument is that there are wealthy financiers and business types who are buying up the British land because it's a way for them to avoid inheritance tax, precisely because of this loophole for the farmers. So the response to that would be the Labour Party budget should include provisions that if you can prove that you are actually a farmer, that you've been working the land for 10 years, you remain exempt from this inheritance tax. If there is no such proof, then you get your inheritance tax. And in the case that it was just a wealthy banker, I'm not particularly for inheritance tax, but I wouldn't necessarily be against it in that scenario. But in the case you're hurting the people, the working people of Britain, it's actually you're right to Isabel to mention Klaus Schwabist. You will own nothing and you'll be happy. But it's also old school socialism. This is, the headlines the Guardian has been running. We've got to take on the small farmers. If you even have the slight cursory knowledge of the Great Leap Forward or a cursory knowledge of the Holodomor, you will know how unbelievably provocative it is. Elon Musk retweeted that exact headline from the Guardian saying Britain has gone full Stalin. I mean, it's very upsetting when you get amongst it. Amongst the farmers, and you see what.
For the record, I'm against an inheritance tax, regardless whether it's farmers or anyone else. I don't see how the government just should take your money that's been taxed your entire life just because you died. But putting that aside for a sec, I want to jump to something else in the UK because you guys got an awful. It's good that you're in the United States right now, right, Winston? You're here.
No, I'm in London.
Oh, you're in line. Well,
We're sending you good vibes.
This could be an issue for you. We might have to send you the Rubin Report jet after I read this headline. This is from Michael Schellenberger in the Telegraph. The UK appears to respect free speech, but it doesn't. A judge has jailed a woman for 9 months for live streaming allegedly racist comments. Police investigated a writer for a deleted post, and today the police harassed a critic of gender ideology for an alleged hate crime. The Telegraph headlines: I too had visit from police over tweet, says writer. How Allison Pearson's tweet sparked a year-long police investigation. Care worker who streamed riot aftermath jailed. There's also been things where police are showing up because somebody posted on social media that they just didn't want the Palestine flags all over their community. I mean, a series of these insane things. You are in London right now. You are not protected by the First Amendment. Would you like to do this in code? Do you want to just blink? How should we handle this?
I mean, this is such a huge story. I'm working on it at the moment to make, but I don't know how to compact it into anything short. But just on the stories that you brought up, Allison Pearson is the journalist. She's actually just been let off by the Essex police. That story specifically was that a year ago in November, just after the October 7th massacre, she was in London and at a pro-Israel event and mistook a flag, which she thought was a Hamas flag, which was actually a Pakistani Imran Khan, his political party flag. And she said, oh, they're Jew haters, thinking it was Hamas. When she was pointed out to her, she deleted the tweet, knowing that she was wrong. A year later, i.e. earlier this month, the police come knocking on her door on Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, no less. And she's investigated, and we have this thing called a non-crime hate incident. A non-crime hate incident is something...
Orwell would be proud.
Oh, well, I mean, Orwell was moderate compared to what's going on. A non-crime hate incident, this isn't a real crime. It's if someone perceives you to be spreading hatred, and how they define hatred is different in every bloody country. What an offense is different. They don't actually define it. If someone perceives you to be offensive to someone, even if you're not the person being offended to, you can log a non-crime hate incident. This has gone so insane that this is actually bizarre. This week, a 9-year-old was booked by the police for calling another classmate a retard.
I love that word.
Another student was booked by the police for saying their classmate smelt like fish. This is how the police are spending their time. The examples you've given, you could be like, oh, they seem silly. They're going after children. The other example you gave was of the Cameron Bell. Cameron Bell, 23 years old. She's just been given 9 months. Now, in Michael Schellenberger, the investigative reporter you just quoted, said it was for shooting racist comments. She did not make the racist comments. It was after the riots in August. She was filming on TikTok, live streaming on TikTok, some of the rioters in the aftermath, not even during the riots. And for that, she's been given a 9-month conviction. At the same time, they're releasing actual violent criminals from prison to make room because the prisons are all full. So, I mean, there's a whole other conversation about a two-tier system going on, which I'd love to explain, but it would take 3 hours because I've got 100 of these cases. In fact, there are literally thousands. I mean, so it's unbelievably infuriating. As things like I had a clip on Gutwell go viral on the weekend because my lawyer called me up when I was in the States saying 2 of your tweets are technically illegal. And I could have been arrested on return. The state of it is insane. And the Labour government don't understand because it's inconceivable that, how do I explain this? They don't really see it as a problem because all of the people being arrested, they're not things that they would ever conceive that they would be arrested for. So they don't. They're like, yeah. Now, I would say a lot of the people one woman got 2.5 years for a tweet, but the tweet itself was it was a pretty ugly tweet. I don't like the tweet, but at the same time, it's a bloody tweet. Yeah. We've got kids running up and down the streets of London with 6-foot-long machetes. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but I mean, they're 2 foot long, and there's actual violent crimes. The police are all over the place, and this place is turning into a hellscape. And I know that sounds like an exaggeration.
Winston, what's the sentiment from Britain? What are people feeling about this? Are people angry? Are they frustrated with the government? Or is everyone just afraid to think differently?
No, things are really, really boiling over. Keir Starmer's favorability rating has hit the floor. This farmer protest was just the first. The first protest against actual government policy. What happened in August, by the way, so there was huge riots up and down the country in the aftermath of the killing of 3 young working class girls in Southport in northern England, Liverpool, and the stabbing of several others. All of that energy that spilled out there is bubbling. It's bubbling away. The people of Britain are very upset. And when the truth comes out about Southport, and I know what the truth is, and I can't say legally, but when it comes out, it's going to be pay close attention, because I am actually nervous to speak.
Yeah,
because I could say something and it might be said that I'm inciting some sort of violence. But all I'm saying is that there's very concerning horizon for Britain.
Well, that illustrates the point perfectly, because I know everyone just sees us in little boxes and you just think, oh, people can say whatever they want, at least from an American perspective. But you quite literally are in London, where we are illustrating how these things are happening, and you could get in some trouble. We did play that clip of you on Gutfeld, by the way, because it's absolutely insane. I think that was on Monday or Tuesday, if people want to see it. I almost called you Ellen, but Isabel, I want to read
how dare
headline.
you, Dave?
Sorry. Oh, God.
Especially this week.
I gave you so much credit before. Now I owe you 2 dinners. But check out this headline, because Ellen, despite everything that we're saying, Ellen DeGeneres post-Trump, she can't live in her Montecito house worth $100 million anymore with all of her servants. She's moving to the UK because...
We don't want to. Things are bad enough.
I am fairly certain... I am fairly certain that the jihadists running the street of London love lesbians. I think I read that somewhere. Am I mistaken, Isabel?
It's general sentiment. Everyone knows that, Dave. You just can't make this stuff up. But am I remotely surprised? No. This is the 4th or 5th big Hollywood name that have said they're never coming back to the United States. Okay, bye. I read the other day that a cruise company is actually offering a 4-year cruise for almost $200,000 at over 400 ports of entry for you to temporarily escape the country while Trump is president. I just can't imagine coming back to a Vance presidency after that. I don't know how those people are going to deal with the continued trajectory of America. But I do think that people like this are in for a rude awakening, right? We talk about stuff like the First Amendment as it's a given and it's a right that every person around the world is entitled to, particularly talk show hosts like Ellen DeGeneres that are quite used to the protections of being able to say everything that's on your mind and to criticize the people in power. But as we're learning in real time from the UK more than anywhere else, that is not a guaranteed right for the vast, vast, vast majority of the planet, to the point that they're now trying to legislate in Scotland specifically that you can't even pray inside of your own home silently if it's visible that you are praying if you're within a certain number of yards of an abortion facility, because that is potentially impacting somebody else's decision for that. So you're criminalizing thought at this point, which, yes, Orwell would be very proud. And I don't know about you. I'm sure all Britain feels exactly this way, Winston, but I think it's time for us to make Orwell fiction again in 2024 and beyond.
Right. Or at least not make Minority Report real. How about that? That would be maybe a lesser version of it. Well, I don't want to get Winston in any more trouble here, so let's finish up by talking about World War III. How about that?
Sounds so comforting.
But first, 1775 coffee. Guys, Peaberry coffee isn't your average bean. It's coffee's best-kept secret. Only 5% of coffee beans grow as peaberries, making them denser, more flavorful, and packed with bold energy to kickstart your mornings. This isn't just coffee, it's a richer, more powerful brew. 1775 Peaberry coffee is for those who refuse to compromise. Each bean is hand-picked at high altitudes for that smooth, powerful kick you need to fuel your day. No corporate crap, no woke nonsense, just the best coffee you'll ever taste. And it's not just about the coffee, it's about about what it stands for, whether it's Peaberry, dark or medium roast, or the new mushroom blend. 1775 Coffee is about quality, freedom, and living with purpose. Head on over to 1775coffee.com, grab your Peaberry, and join the coffee revolution. Use code Rubin to save 15%. Your mornings deserve better. Brew Rebellion. Okay, this from Mario Naufal. Biden approves $275 million weapons package for Ukraine after missile strikes and nuclear doctrine shift. The Biden administration is set to announce a $275 million weapons package for Ukraine, including HIMARS systems, drones, and Javelin missiles. The aid will be drawn from U.S. stockpiles, expediting delivery to Ukrainian forces. The U.S. still has $6.9 billion in drawdown authority funds for Ukraine. This comes as Biden recently approved Ukraine's use of long-range missiles against Russia, leading to Ukraine firing ATACMS into Russian territory. Meanwhile, Russia has updated its nuclear doctrine, signaling a more aggressive stance amid the ongoing conflict, and that is from Fox. Isabel, let me start with you on this one.
So comforting.
I would prefer not to go into World War III. I would prefer a man with dementia not lead us there, and a woman who basically cooed him in these final months of their administration, and yet they seem to be doing everything possible to drive us there. Is that alarmist, or am I just nuts?
No, I don't think that's alarmist at all. And actually, the shocking lack of coverage of this story this week from the media makes me very, very uneasy, because there is nothing stable or comforting about the people currently running our country for the next 60 plus days. That's a long time. And I think people have already thought in their mind we've moved on to a Trump presidency, but that's not coming until January 20th. There's a whole lot of damage that could happen between now and November and the end of January. But what really bothered me more than anything else about this story this week, besides the lack of media coverage and the complete cover-up and interference that the media is running for the Biden administration, after Putin had then said, okay, we're now going to update our nuclear policy to make it okay for us to retaliate against you. The day after that, President Biden reversed his own policy, approving the use of anti-personnel landmines sent from the United States to Ukraine to escalate the conflict even more. Now, I then learned America is one of the only countries of the major developed countries in the world that is not a signatory to the Ottawa Treaty from 1997, which dignifies landmines as a war crime. But most of NATO countries and most of the developed world would consider this literally a war crime. And yet you'll never hear about that type of escalation in the media. And this is all happening mere days before Donald Trump was scheduled to sit down with Putin to try to negotiate some sort of peace agreement. So this administration is making it abundantly clear they're going to do everything they can to likely personally benefit and financially profit from the military-industrial complex, because they know that we're probably going to usher in an era of peace come Donald Trump's next term.
Right. And the crazy part here is, like, does anyone honestly think, oh, we gave Ukraine a couple more long-range missiles or this weapon or that weapon, is suddenly the war going to end? I don't think there's one person on earth who honestly believes that. And check this, if you don't think I'm right about that, check out this video. This is Vladimir Putin back in September.
There is certainly an attempt to substitute the concept, because it is not about granting permission or prohibiting the Kiev regime from striking across the entire territory. He is already striking utilizing drones and other means in multiple ways. But when it comes to employing long-range precision weapons of Western production, that is a completely different story. The fact is, as I have already mentioned, and any experts will confirm, both here and in the West, the Ukrainian army is unable to strike with modern long-range precision systems of Western production. It cannot do this. This is only possible with the use of additional and comprehensive intelligence data from systems. Second point, and very important, perhaps key, is that flight missions for these missile systems can essentially be entered only by military personnel from NATO countries. Ukrainian military personnel cannot do this. And therefore, it is not about allowing the Ukrainian regime to likely strike Russia with this weapon or not allowing it. It is ultimately about making a decision on whether NATO countries are directly involved in the military conflict or not. Considering the change in the very essence of this end, we will make suitable decisions based on the threats that will be posed to us.
All right, so 2 points there. One, just technical. That is obviously AI dubbed, so that's not Putin actually speaking, but it's an AI translation. But the broader point, or the more important point, Winston, is he's basically saying if you guys, because it's not Ukraine in essence, if NATO starts shooting these long-range rockets into our country, we are going to behave a little bit differently, and that's exactly what we're doing. I'm not sitting here defending Putin or anything he's done, but at some point, poking the bear who has nukes just seems crazy. That's been my position on this thing for 2+ years.
Yeah. So in the Britain, it's also British storm shooter missiles that have also been, storm shadow missiles that have also been fired into Russian territory. So we're in this mess with you. I find this unbelievably depressing. It makes Trump's campaign promise of ending the conflict before his inauguration even harder. And my question to you is, as Americans, normally in a transition period, they would include the new administration in such conversations. So you remember in the 2008 crash when Obama had already been elected, Obama was brought into the White House when they were working out how, what they're going to do about the bank bailouts. Is there any sense that this is happening now? Is any of Trump administration in the White House?
Yeah, that's the weird thing that's happening right now, because Biden has no reason to placate to the warmongers anymore. He could pave a nice transition to Trump. It sort of seemed like that's what he was going to do last week when they took their smiley pictures and photo op at the White House. But now we seem to be seeing a reversal of that. So I think the real issue is we have no idea who's driving this, because it obviously isn't Biden. Is it Kamala? I don't think so. So it's like, who's behind the scenes there? Is it Obama? Maybe, but yeah, Biden has a chance to wrap up a nice package and just hand it to Trump. And instead, it looks like he's about to put a freaking bomb in that box instead.
Or even to take credit for ending the war. I mean, if this happened in the Biden administration, you would think you would want that to be a part of your legacy, even if that was negotiated by the incoming Trump transition team. So I genuinely don't have a lot of logical understanding, but I think that's kind of the point with what's happening at the White House right now. The average American doesn't know who's running the show, and that's a really scary reality for us to be in.
Guys, it's not ending the war that they want to do. If Biden wants and Blinken, they want to destroy Putin. That's the only way they can envision this war ending.
Exactly. And what is, but what does that look like? So, okay, so you mean you're literally toppling Russia, who again have nukes and everything else? Guys, we normally try to end the show with a clip that's uplifting and inspiring and offers people a little something positive to take with them, particularly on Fridays because of the weekend. But we thought with you two special guests on the program today, we would end with a simulation of a Russian nuclear strike on Kiev.
If the bomb was 100 megatons, it would have a wave of thermal radiation that would reach a radius of 64.2 kilometers. The air blast radius would reach up to 54.6 kilometers, followed by an electromagnetic wave of ionizing radiation that would reach up to 6.99 kilometers. The fireball would expand to a radius of 7.92 kilometers and would last for around 35.7 seconds. The total number of deaths by such a blast would amount to 2,412,050 people.
Boy, guys, we can't throw in a little something of Jordan Peterson saying something inspiring or something else. I like how, Winston, you put your hat on just as the bomb landed, which implied that it was some sort of shield, which in some sense, I suppose it is.
Yeah, Putin's not going to do that. That would go against the Russian myth that Kiev is the center of the motherland. I mean, but maybe we'll see. All I know is the future isn't as bad as you might want it to be. Dark MAGA, let's go, baby.
Isabel, bring us home on that strange clip. Or whatever else you want. What are you doing this weekend?
I think there's so many reasons to have hope, and there's been a fire reignited in people in the last few weeks to a level that I didn't even anticipate necessarily after a Trump win, because it's obvious we are fighting a global cultural war against the people who want to silence and suppress ordinary individuals, but people are winning again. And so if we can give you any message of hope and support, if you're watching this today, just remember you have a lot more power and impact than you think if you're just willing to tell the truth.
Isabel Brown bringing us home like a champ. Winston, Isabel, I thank you guys. Have a great weekend. And it's Friday, everybody, so no post-game show. We'll be back on Monday. Adios.